Good morning, class. Welcome to our review session for our test on Tuesday. The thing I'm recording this with will cut me off at 10 minutes. So what I'm probably going to do is record two different videos for you guys to review this morning as you're studying for your test. The first one, I want to talk about the essays and march you through the information that I think is really important to include in your essay. If the professor says this is important stuff, these are the things that you need to include. I'm basically going to be going through checking these items off to make sure that they are discussed in your essays on Tuesday. Okay? I'll record another video in a minute that's going to focus on the multiple choice side of stuff. I'm going to go through and ask you guys some pretend multiple choice questions, just like we were going to do in class had we met today. Okay? Hopefully we made the right call to do this from home. Best case scenario, it's just going to be a little bit more comfortable for us, and worst case scenario, we are preventing some member of our class from getting stuck and flooding their car somewhere in town. Okay, so I appreciate your patience and cooperation to do class in the most safe and comfortable way for everybody today. All right, so without further ado, as you guys know, essay question number 1 is going to ask you to explain why the founders believed they were justified in rebelling against the British. Okay, so there's really two elements to this, right? One is the why did we believe we could rebel, and number 2, what were the practical things that justified rebellion? So I'm looking for both a theoretical explanation and for a practical explanation in your answer. Okay, Locke is going to give us the theoretical justification. Downer will also give us some theoretical language, but he's also going to give us a number of practical things that justified rebellion, and you should also pull a few examples from our class lectures. Okay, so let's just move down the board here and review fairly quickly. Okay, refer to your own notes as you're studying. Feel free to pause me and to shore up these terms in your own notes. Okay, if I don't have the ability to cover them thoroughly enough in my 10 minutes here. Okay. For Locke, you need to be able to explain the concept of the state of nature and the law of nature to me fairly clearly. Basically, the law of nature says you don't harm others. We understand in the state of nature that we are all free and that we are all equal, and that if we use our reason to guide us, as the law of nature would tell us without government around, we understand that in this primitive state of nature without a government, the most important thing is for us to maintain our welfare, our self-preservation. We do this by respecting the freedom and equality of others, by not harming them and not stealing their stuff. In the state of nature, you're just trying to get basic provisions for food, clothing, and shelter anyway. There is an abundance of them. Apples will rot and spoil. Therefore, there is no reason to harm others in a state of nature. Okay? But we are humans. The aristocrat will become an oligarch. The king will become a tyrant. We behave in a selfish, self-interested fashion. Madison will talk more about this with faction, right? But in terms of what this means is that although the state of nature is mostly peaceful, a state of war may occur. Someone may violate the law of nature and attempt to harm us despite the fact that there is no common sense for that. When that occurs, we are granted the right of war, or the ability for self-preservation. The ability to defend ourselves when someone else is attacking us. So a state of war means you're trying to harm someone else. A right of war means that you're trying to defend yourself from harm. We use our conscience to be able to tell the difference. If we're a third party observing a fist fight, we're able to say in our conscience, well, I know that thug is attacking that little guy because I watched him attack him. Okay. In our Declaration of Independence, the long list of justifications for why we're going to war is a way of saying our conscience is telling us that we know the king is exercising a state of war against us. We are acting in a self-defensive way to provide for our basic freedom and equality. Okay? A civil society is a society that is governed by law and by consent. Essentially, we're trying to create a society that replicates the state of nature, where consent-based laws prevent us from attacking and harming one another. Okay? So law becomes, and not a person, not a king, becomes the standard through which good society is judged. Okay? You can rebel against a king or an oligarch if they're behaving in a tyrannical fashion. If the civil society is no longer a civil society, but the rule of some tyrannical thug, you have the right to rebel against that thug. And Locke will give us a number of specifics which justify rebellion. I probably need you to refer to your notes for many of these specifics, but they're divided into two categories. The king has done something which dissolves government. In other words, we elected a bunch of legislators to make laws, but the king has either dissolved parliament so they can't meet, therefore it's rule of the king, not the guys we voted for, or the king has done something like bribed them to his interest. Okay? The other category was violations of trust, where the king is endeavoring to corrupt the legislature, or he's endeavoring to dissolve the legislature. In those cases, Locke is developing an argument for preemptive rebellion. The ship has not arrived to Algiers, but we can tell the slave ship is headed towards Algeria. Therefore, you have to rebel before you are made a slave. Once you're a slave, rebellion is impossible, okay, because you're already shackled. So Locke, in giving us this revolutionary idea for rebellion, where a king is actually a rebel, in so doing, he gives us this sort of preemptive. If the king is trying to be a tyrant, that's when we rebel. This is important because when we transition to giving me specifics for why the colonies thought they could rebel against the British, you need to be able to connect the dots between Downer and Locke. The best way to do this is to go through and answer these questions here for Downer. We covered him very thoroughly in class that day, and we answered all of these questions together. Hopefully you can refer to your notes to see why America is like a state of nature. We are very distantly located from